Welcome to Radical Underdogs, and this time we are stripping down the engine which failed at Silverstone, the first race of the season. We developed a really bad rod knock, and I had to get an engine installed by AB Motorsport just to get the car out for the first race of the season. It's turned out to be quite a good move, and it's got my first top 10 finish of the season. But this time we're trying to work out what went wrong with the previous engine. It had just had the head rebuilt, but it sounded very much like a bottom end issue, and the bottom end hasn't been rebuilt since I've owned this engine. I've had it for about 3 or 4 years, and it's done a lot of racing in that time, so actually it's probably pretty good going. Pretty disappointing after all the work we did with the head. That head's been off and on 2 or 3 times over the winter, so it's a bit annoying that it finally decides to let the bottom end go only a few hours after the head rebuild. Anyway, that's how things go sometimes. In this rebuild, I'm trying to just work out what happened, trying to look at the destruction, and then I realise I have messed up with the engine stand. I haven't done this before. Actually, the engine stand was holding the pan to the actual stand, so having to move the bolts with it on the stand, which is probably not safe. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so I did manage to move the bolts eventually. It was a bit of a pain, to be honest. I brought the engine hoist back over just to lift it off, and then finally got it done. Got the pan off. Actually, when I took the pan off, it wasn't particularly obvious what was the problem, really. I was expecting there to be a bit more engine destruction given the noise it was making, but actually from the outside kind of looked okay. When we take the bearings off, I'll show you the picture. It actually is not very pretty on the inside. I've not done any work on the bottom end of this engine before, or any engine really, so this is brand new to me. I've taken this head off though, so several times already, so this is a repeat task, so I'm pretty confident with this bit, doing the timing belt, taking the timing belt off, and taking all the ancillary bits off the engine and taking the cylinder head off. That's something I've done before, so at least on this bit it's proceeding quite smoothly, I'd say. If you haven't done this before, most people for the first time do this with the engine inside the car, but with the engine actually being outside of the car, it makes this stuff a whole lot easier. And actually, I do think that maybe as a practice, it's always quite a good idea to have a look at an engine outside of the car. It makes it much more obvious what you're looking at when it's actually back in the car. Anyway, back to past wheel. Potentially this is the noise. Let's compare that noise to what it sounded like when it was running. Okay, that's the inside of the first, well, number 2, whatever it is, bearing. And there's more of a look at this at the end of the video, where I've got sort of a better look at what the bearings look like. I'm pretty sure that was the noise. I don't think it was the worst lifter tick you've ever heard. From the look of the bearings, it probably was worth rebuilding anyway, so even if it wasn't... Oh, by the way, that mistake, I wouldn't, let's say if you're doing this for the first time, absolutely no need to take the spring out of the oil pump, which is the bypass area, I think. That just flew off in a completely random direction. I think I recovered all the bits for that. I might replace it with an aftermarket oil pump anyway, if I'm going to rebuild this engine. I think it's a little bit of extra money, but if you're spending all the money on rebuilding the engine, I guess you might as well. This is all bits that I wasn't really familiar with, so there's lots of taking pictures just in case I need to put stuff back together again, and also looking at the pistons when they come out. Also go by the book as well, so a lot slower, as you can tell from the top end, which was kind of just doing it by memory. It's a lot more difficult when you're doing it for the first time, I think. The idea, hopefully, is that the crankshaft will be reusable. The damage, and I'll show you at the end, the damage to the bearings, I think is quite extensive, but the damage to the crankshaft is potentially less. So I'm hoping that just with a refresh on the block, obviously new bearings, might need to change we need to oversize the bore, maybe oversize and get some undersized or oversized bearings for the crankshaft as well. You can tell I probably don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm going to take this to a professional, see what the kind of view is on whether this is salvageable or not. and then we'll go from there. But that is pretty much the engine. Everything is basically taken apart, so the block is completely bare. The head is still intact, so I might have to do a head rebuild again. This is what it looks like on the piston, and I put the bearings back in. So this is the bearing surface that you can see. It is pretty scratched and scored, which I hope is what was causing the noise, and there was no other. I think I've identified the damage. None of them were spun in the wrong position though, so I'm hoping it's just excessive wear on the bearings. And this is what the crankshaft looks like. There are some marks, but there's no deep gouges or anything, so I'm hoping that this is going to be reusable. I mean, comments are always welcome, and if you've liked this, then please do give it a like. And obviously there will be a bit of time between this and a full rebuild video, but keep subscribed and you'll see that when that comes out. Thanks very much for watching.